Hey everyone, Aaron here from Rudy Visuals. Hope you're all doing well. In today's video, we're talking all about this, which is the Sony A7R III, and whether you should buy one in 2022. So if you're not familiar with Sony's full frame mirrorless cameras, it can be a little bit confusing. Sony definitely doesn't make it easy. So let me break it down for you real quick. So we have the regular A7 series, the S series, and also the R. So simply put, the S is kind of like the more video focused camera, and the regular A7 is the kind of budget hybrid model. And then you have the R, which is the photo focus camera, which places image quality and higher resolution at the top of its priority list. Now, to confuse you even more, there's also the FX series, which are more high-end video cameras for shooting with larger crews, as well as the A9 series, which is more for like high-end sports photography and like really fast-moving subjects. So if your main goal is general photography and taking the best quality images, an A7R camera is going to be a great choice for you. It is also a pretty competent video camera, as you'll see here, with the ability to shoot 4K 30 frames per second and up to 120 frames in full HD. But as we'll see from the specs later on, the R3 is geared more towards photographers. This is a camera that was first released way back in October 2017. It is a 5-year-old camera now, I believe. And there is also now an A7R IV, which if you see here, will set you back well over £3,000 here in the UK, whereas a decent R3 will be yours for about £1,600 to £1,700 on the used market. And if your budget doesn't quite stretch to that, even an R2 can be found for well under £1,000. For me, the R3 represents a great compromise deal, giving you a high resolution full frame camera with more modern features for photographers without costing your ancestors buried hidden treasures and life savings. Anyways, before we do anything else, here's some of our favorite photos taken with the Sony A7R III to showcase what this little beast can do. So what did you think of the images? Let us know in the comment section down below. And if you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button to see more. So I think we'll start with actually the main event, the reason why you'd buy this camera, and that is the image quality. The A7R III features a 42.4 megapixel full frame Exmor CMOS sensor, and that huge sensor is what sets the R3 apart from its other siblings. That higher megapixel count allows you to retain way more detail than your average camera. Even if we zoom in this much to some of our photo samples, you'll see just how much detail there still is. This is a great feature to have for those of you who need to print out large images for commercial advertising or in publications, for example, and also it gives you the ability to crop in and still retain loads of sharpness and image quality. This also gives you so much more flexibility in post and gives you more margin for cropping in for like changing your framing, for example. So this makes the R3 ideally suited for any kind of professional photographer who needs high resolution images, from everything from wildlife, landscape, real estate, fine art, and fashion photography. If we compare side by side with the Sony A7 III, for example, which has a piddly 24.2 megapixel sensor, you can see just how much sharper the A7R III is when we zoom in. The only downside to all this mega resolution is that the raw files, even the JPEGs, they are absolutely massive, so you will definitely need plenty of storage space if you plan to own a camera like this. In video mode, 4K up to 30 frames does look great, but I do find that in 1080p, especially with when you're shooting slow-mos, for example, the footage can look a little bit soft at times, particularly at 120 frames per second, when compared with kind of like more modern focused video cameras like the A7S III and A7 IV. Now those cameras also have 10-bit 422 video and more picture profiles like the new Sony S Cinetone, whereas with the R3 you're stuck with 8-bit 420. That's not to say you can't get nice video out of the R3, it's perfectly fine. There are just better cameras out there for pro level videos if that's something that you need as well. Now the color science in my opinion is great on this camera. I know that's a very subjective thing. The color science on these Sonys is pretty good these days.
No way! Clearly Canon has the better color science!
Oh no, not this again. Clearly Nikon has the best color science of all.
I don't know, you know, I took pictures of my iPhone the other day and they look pretty good. Personally though, I've always found that images just look really good straight out of camera. You really don't need to do too much tweaking to get your colors to look great from the R3. This is definitely also helped by the R3's 15 stops of dynamic range, which is plenty enough to recover images even if you completely blow out the exposure. Skin tones look very natural. We've done portrait shoots with models with varying skin tones, and again, it didn't take much effort to get colors looking nice and natural. The R3 is also fantastic in low light. It has an ISO range of 100 all the way to 32,000, expandable up to 102,400. And even when pushed, noise performance is really impressive. For example, we shot this touch rugby training session with this camera at sunset with the 70-200 f2.8, and it was going around ISO about 1000 up to 5000. And as you'll see, the R3 performed great. We got us really clean, usable images, which is even more impressive considering that these are not slow moving subjects and it wasn't particularly bright either. Which leads me nicely onto the focusing performance. Now the A7R III features a hybrid AF system with 399 phase and 425 contrast detection points. You can also shoot up to 10 frames per second continuous shooting with AF and AE tracking. And while a camera like the A9, for example, I think it can shoot up to 20 frames per second. Honestly, 10 is enough for most shooting situations unless you're a professional sports photographer. You can also silence your shutter, which is perfect for events where you don't want to disturb your subjects, such as weddings and special events. The autofocus is very reliable, and of course having IAF and excellent subject tracking makes it really easy to shoot fast moving subjects. The R3 also has 5-axis internal stabilization that helps a ton to keep your images sharp and blur free. I had a really fun day, for example, shooting this color fun run, and there were people running all over the place, throwing dust at each other, and despite that, the R3 was just getting shot after shot after shot in sharp focus. It made my job so easy. As for the build quality and design, the R3 is pretty much what you'd expect from a full-frame Sony mirrorless camera. Side by side with the A7R III, it's pretty much identical size-wise, and it's just slightly smaller and thinner than the newer A7S III. It features dual SD card slots and has a 3-inch tilt screen rather than a flip screen, and weighs in at around 650 grams. It is also weather, dust and moisture resistant, but is not fully weatherproof, so just keep that in mind. While it will survive some light rain, it's not going to survive a dunk in a pool, unfortunately. For me, the lack of a flip out screen is kind of a bummer, and I don't know why. I just find the image quality on the screen itself is not great. It sometimes makes images look more punchy and overexposed than they actually are. So I recommend turning down the brightness on the screen to help with that, or to rely more on the viewfinder, which thankfully is excellent. You can also use the touchscreen for focusing as well as the joystick, which is nice. Now, one other issue I have with the camera is the pretty god-awful UI and menu system. You do get used to it after a while, but compared to their newer UIs like on the S3, the Sony A7R III's older design is not that great. It will take a while to get used to. There are some settings that will take you some time to try and find, and you might have to kind of like Google mid-shoot how to find certain settings. So it's definitely something that you want to just take into consideration when buying this camera. So with all that being said, is the Sony A7R III still a good camera in 2022? Absolutely yes, it is an excellent high resolution camera for photographers that need that high resolution images. That's also actually pretty affordable, but it does come with a caveat. So if you are a video shooter or more of a hybrid shooter, I would steer you towards something like the A7 IV or A7 III, depending on your budget, of course. The extra megapixels and resolution aren't really going to improve your video quality, and the R3 does lack some of the more modern specs like 10-bit color and higher frame rates in 4K. However, if you don't really care about video, or you only need casual video occasionally and your main need is high resolution photography, then an R3 is still an excellent choice considering how affordable these are. The A7R IV and its monster 61 megapixel sensor is still a bit too pricey to wholeheartedly recommend, and the R3 here represents very good value. Now, there are plenty of alternatives if you are in need of a high resolution camera, such as the still excellent Nikon D850, there's the Z9, Fujifilm has that monster GFX 100 with its 102 megapixel sensor, whatever it is. So there's definitely lots of choice out there, but for me, the R3 represents one of the best used deals right now for photographers. But do you agree? Let us know down there in the comment section below. So that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found it useful, hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe to see more. You can also follow us on the socials down here as always. And any questions, leave them down there in the comments as well, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.